They say that the only constant in life is change, and that's certainly true in wrestling. Here's an unfun fact. There's a whole generation of wrestling fans, college-aged for that matter, that have only known the biggest company in the world as WWE. It was one of the company's biggest courtroom losses. This is the story of how a panda pinned Vince McMahon. WWE has been WWE for 23 years now. I'll give you a moment to contemplate your own mortality. Lucky for you, I find wrestling lawsuits incredibly fascinating. So how did a behemoth like the World Wrestling Federation lose its name to a conservation charity? Well, it all starts way back in 1961. It was in September of that year that the World Wildlife Fund was established. The group's intention was to raise awareness and money to protect habitats and endangered species. In keeping with that motive, they adopted the famous Panda logo. In their first decade, they quickly expanded globally with branches and projects from the US and UK to Nepal and Tasmania. They became the worldwide leader in environmental conservation. While the World Wildlife Fund was growing, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation was creating its own reputation. Run by Vince McMahon Sr., the promotion was able to become one of the most prominent and successful in the country. In 1963, McMahon broke away from the National Wrestling Alliance, which only made the WWWF even more successful. In the spring of 1979, the WWWF becomes the much simpler WWF. When it's actually trademarked is a bit of a question. Linda McMahon always says early 1980s, so maybe 1980, 1981? In 1982, Vince and Linda established Titan Sports Inc. and purchased the WWF from Vince Sr. Around June the following year, the Federation introduces the iconic block logo. Throughout the mid-1980s, the fund strengthened its relationships in the US, Asia, and Africa, even helping to rediscover the greater bamboo lemur in Madagascar. The lemur had been designated as extinct since 1972. By 1985, the Federation was in full expansion mode, taking over the wrestling scene across North America. The expansion began to spread internationally in 1989. In an effort to protect their IP for that global dominance, Titan applied for a federal trademark of the WWF initials. The World Wildlife Fund opposed the request, citing that it would cause confusion in the marketplace. Thankfully, by September of 1989, the fund and the Fed come to an agreement where Titan would not use the initials in New Times Roman font when it's standing alone, and the fund would drop the opposition. A very specific yet simple agreement. However, in September 1991, the WWFs get into another dispute in Japan, which leads them to begin negotiating a more global solution to their issue. But they don't really make much progress. By the early 1990s, the fund spends millions expanding their campaigns and fundraising from just conservation efforts to combating poaching and the illegal animal trade. By April 1992, the US government begins its steroid investigation into Vince and Titan Sports. With that comes lots of other negative publicity. Every scandal that Vince was able to sweep under the rug bubbles back to the surface. Every newspaper in the country had bold negative headlines about the WWF. The fund must have been reaching their breaking point because this is when they really start to challenge Titan's rights to the initials. In December of 1992, the fund files a lawsuit against the Federation in Switzerland. They requested an injunction against distributing WWF magazine. The injunction was successful and the publisher was prohibited from publishing using the WWF initials other than to describe the fund. The fund pounces after this victory and start opposing Titan's trademark applications around the globe throughout 1993. The Federation even fought back and opposed the fund's trademark requests in the UK, Denmark, and Spain. On January 20th, 1994, the two sides finally come to an agreement that Titan wouldn't use the initials WWF in any language with the exception of event names and stuff like WWF Champion. So they pretty much weren't allowed to use WWF alone globally. The other exceptions being the Federation logo and the full name of World Wrestling Federation. The agreement did have different restrictions in the US. Article 5 does allow for the oral use of the initials. For example, someone using WWF in a promo is permissible in the US based on the agreement. However, Titan was fully restricted from using the initials visually in print for any merchandise. Titan also agreed never to attack or deny the fund its rights to the WWF or its trademarks consisting of the initials. During their negotiations through 1992 and 1993, the Federation continued to insist that there would be no risk of confusion in the marketplace. Obviously, the fund argued the opposite. They also expressed concern over potential harm done to their reputation by Titan scandals. In fact, some meeting notes supplied to the court by Linda McMahon sums up the fund's overwhelming repugnance at being associated with the World Wrestling Federation, including violence and anti-conservation characters like Skinner and Jake the Snake Roberts. The biggest issues, however, arose in 1997 with the launch of WWF.com and the debut of the Scratch logo. The Federation web address was dangerously close to the fund's website at the time, WWF.org, and the fund contended that the new Scratch logo clearly read as WWF. In 1999, Titan takes WWF public, officially becoming World Wrestling Federation Entertainment, Inc. That same year, the fund began threatening legal action regarding the website and Scratch logo. I think the Federation were taking it pretty seriously this time, since the advertising for No Mercy in the UK in '99 featured this altered logo. I'm curious if they were already trying to find a workaround to avoid a lawsuit. The two sides would have some negotiations until the fund finally filed suit in December of 2000 in the UK. The arguments were pretty simple. The World Wildlife Fund had been using the initials nearly a full 2 decades before the McMahons, and they had major concerns over confusion among consumers and negative publicity associated with the Federation using the initials, and that the website and Scratch logo violated their 1994 agreement. Fund spokeswoman Anita Neville really highlights the concerns perfectly when she stated,
"We are a global organisation relying on donations, and we wanted people to be able to give donations in confidence. The initials are vital to our organisation."
The Federation, represented in the case by Jeffrey Hobbs, Siobhan Ward, and Emma Hemsworth, disputed that anyone could confuse the two organizations, and they should be allowed to use the initials as they've long established their branding in the wrestling space, and it would cost a small fortune to rebrand. They also argued that the agreement did not expressly cover the internet. In addition to that, they argued, according to Article 5, that they had the right to use the initials in the US, and delivering services via the internet in the US was within the parameters of the agreement. Or, as Jerry McDevitt put it in 2001,
"All these millions and millions of fans, if the environmental group had its way, would type in WWF.com, and instead of seeing everything they've seen for years, are going to be directed to their site and learn about panda bears and whatever they're doing to save the world."
In August 2001, the court found in favor of the Panda over Titan.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh no! Oh yeah!
Or as the New York Times put it,
"The Federation is dead, pinned in the legal ring by a conservation-minded panda. No amount of drop kicks or people's elbows could save the Federation from extinction."
The court found that since at least 1997, Titan had significantly breached the agreement, with the website being the most egregious. The judge also determined that the Scratch logo was in violation of the agreement, as it was clearly a visual representation of the initials, and more so than the block logo, which they agreed read just WF. Finally, the judge also agreed that the fund's concern about damage to its reputation because of Titan was valid. The judge stated,
"Whether conscious or even subconscious, it has an interest in the initials remaining unsullied in putting as much clear water as possible between it and the Federation. Moreover, that interest is worldwide. One must take into account the possibility of an association in many lands, in many tongues, and by people who are not particularly familiar with the Federation."
The Federation appealed to the House of Lords, with Linda McMahon saying that they had no intention of continuing as WWF even if they won the appeal. They lost the appeal in February 2002. In the appeal court's final decision, they determined that the Federation breaches were not technicalities. They were deliberate breaches of the agreement. Titan should have been fully aware of the risks they were taking when they launched their website, Because of this assumed knowledge of the risk, the fund would not be responsible for the cost of the Federation's rebrand, which Titan estimated to be £35 million, which I think is around 80 million US in today's money, but I'm terrible at math and figuring that stuff out, so I could be very, very wrong. In fact, the Federation was ordered to pay the World Wildlife Fund 40 grand by March 27th. I think what I find most surprising is the Federation lost. They don't lose very often. Vince McMahon is ruthless and Jerry McDevitt is a very savvy litigator. He knows all the loopholes to take and all the arguments to make. I wonder if the case would have gone differently if it was McDevitt as the lead instead of the team they used. I'm sure he was still involved, though. But it probably would have ended up going the same way regardless. The fund had a pretty good case on a lot of fronts. In May 2002, WWFE officially changes its name to WWE.
This is entertainment with a capital E. Hey guys, how you doing?
Linda McMahon stated in a press release regarding the name change, "We will utilize this opportunity to position ourselves emphasizing the entertainment aspect of our company, and at the same time, allay the concerns of the fund." The change led to one of WWE's most iconic ad campaigns, Get the F Out. The clever, in-your-face ads and t-shirts promoted the change to fans, with the McMahon machine getting the word out to the rest of the world. Branding and marketing is something WWE has always done well, and the rebrand of the name was no exception. The ad with the granny trimming the hedge into the Scratch logo and then setting it on fire to transform it into the WWE logo is probably my favorite. It's ridiculous and very early 2000s extreme. But since Vince was so good at branding, that created a new problem. With the name change, they also could not use the Scratch logo or initials even retroactively. So the years and years of footage they had filmed and aired now had to be blurred. And if you remember the Attitude Era, then you know the Scratch logo was everywhere. Title belts, the entranceway, banners, ring skirts, t-shirts on security guards, the announce table, it was everywhere. And any utterance of WWF had to be edited out. According to former WWE production employee John Carlin, the process of editing this archival footage took hundreds of hours.
Tell you what, the WWF blurring, Conrad, was one of the most miserable times of my career.
Can't imagine.
We spent hours upon hours upon hours. And like you said, turnbuckles, flags in the arena.
Ring skirts, microphones,
referee's jersey.
The banners in the ceiling.
Exactly.
The entrance.
Table.
The bumpers.
Oh my goodness. And then finally, at one point, I think we got the fat WWF okayed at the beginning. I think that was our first step. And then finally everything got cleared. But no, I'm talking about like hundreds of hours just on blur, not even producing the show, just blurring the damn show.
Thankfully, WWE and WWF quickly came to an agreement that allowed the block logo to be featured. But all this editing still made things like the WrestleMania box set and all their documentaries so annoying to watch. Want to relive the TLC match from Mania X7? Good luck not getting distracted by all that blur. In August 2012, it's revealed that WWE and WWF had reached an agreement that would allow them to use both the block and Scratch logos in archival footage, getting rid of all that terrible blurring. Obviously, they weren't able to use the old logos on new merchandise and retro show names, etc., but with the pending launch of the network, this was a huge win for the WWE and especially fans. Interestingly, in December 2020, a company called D'Imperio Sports and Entertainment LLC filed to trademark World Wrestling Federation for the purposes of wrestling exhibits and the performances by professional wrestlers and entertainers. The World Wrestling Federation was coming back, but it was abandoned in 2022 due to a failure to respond. When Netflix debuted the Mr. McMahon docuseries, Vince finally admitted something. He didn't actually want to change the name of the company.
It wasn't necessarily a good thing, the fact we had to change our name. I didn't want to change. But you can't do anything about it once something is closed. You have to move on.
Now, almost 25 years later, the WWE brand and public presence is maybe stronger than it ever was as WWF. They're making more money than they did as WWF. They have more figures from pop culture involved regularly than ever. Now there's a whole generation of fans that have only ever known it as WWE. I wonder if the name may change again with TKO as owners. But who knows how much longer they'll own it. It's definitely interesting to think of what the future for WWE may be. Today, the WWF continues its mission for conservation and protecting the globe with an eye on the future. In 2023, they launched the Oceans Futures platform, an early warning tool to prevent greater conflict, food insecurity, and geopolitical tensions over ocean resources by 2030. Also, WWF.com now redirects to WWFE.com, which is apparently for sale. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by subscribing or following on social media, either here or here. What do you think of the WWF versus WWF case? Do you think you could have come up with a better name than WWE? Drop your suggestions in the comments. And a huge thank you to J Kasper for his amazing artwork for this video. Check him out here. I'm Scott from WrestleSpective. Watch wrestling, love wrestling. Thanks for watching.